Hey Lancers, my name is Ryan Catherwood and I work in the Office of Alumni and Career Services. Well, we know that this is a period of uncertainty. And with a global pandemic like it is, that hiring is very different than it once was just a few months ago. But the good news is that amongst our alumni population are hundreds of professionals that work in the field of talent management and recruitment, often focusing and specializing on the recruitment of college students. So we thought it would be great to not just hear from us in the Office of Alumni and Career Services, but from those alums who work day in and day out in the field of hiring and recruitment and staffing. So today we're going to be featuring Madelyn Serefko, class of 2008, and she works for Union Pacific Railroad, one of America's iconic brands. She shares lots of great insights that I know you'll find interesting, and the video itself is about 30 minutes long, and I ask her many questions. This is an unedited video, so you'll hear all of our conversation, and I hope that you'll connect with Madelyn and reach out to her about opportunities at Union Pacific, but also just take some of the ideas that she has and strategies that she has and hopefully make them actionable and something that you can do moving forward over the next few weeks and months. Okay, now for my interview with Madelyn Serefko. Okay, cool. Well, maybe we could just start off, if you wouldn't just mind saying, sort of introducing yourself, your role, and how you got into your line of work.
Sure. So, Madelyn Serefko, I'm a senior recruiter with Union Pacific Railroad, and I graduated from Longwood in 2008 and started off in sales. And that was a pretty natural fit for me. So I continued along that path, and then I got into a staffing recruitment role. And then I started working with students in that. And from there, I decided I wanted to move from staffing and I wanted to work in corporate America. I set my sights on working for a Fortune 500 company. And I worked with one, and then I got lucky enough to have Union Pacific actually give me a call and say, hey, we're looking for someone with your skill set. How about you come work for us? And so I leaped at that opportunity 3 years ago, and I've been working with students and being that kind of liaison for their first position. And then now I'm also working a dual role where I actually help our agreement or unionized employees and do that sort of recruiting for the state of Minnesota as well.
That's awesome. Union Pacific, of course, one of the great American brands. How old is the company itself? It's at least 150
So
years old, right?
1862.
Yeah.
So it's been around quite a while, and we operate in 23 states, all west of the Mississippi, largest freight railroad in North America. So very historic company, but a lot of people think historic means old school, but we actually have a lot of technology that we utilize, not only, in our corporate side of things, but also out in the field as well, from drone technology to different sensors and all kinds of different things, which would be a whole nother conversation, of course. So long-standing company in North America. Really excited to be a part of it.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about where we are today, right? So we have now been sort of quarantined here, social distancing for about 8 weeks. The economy has come to pretty much a screeching halt when it comes to a lot of hiring that's happening. There's really deep concern, of course, on the part of graduating seniors about how to be thinking about the economy, entering the workforce. And I was wondering if you sort of might offer your assessment as to where we are at this moment and maybe what are a few things that seniors about to graduate in a few weeks from Longwood should be thinking about.
So ironically, I graduated in 2008, and so I faced a tough job market myself upon graduation. So I feel like, I can definitely empathize with seniors at this point in time. And I think, I'm not an economist, and I certainly can't tell you, what's going to happen tomorrow. But I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you're flexible with your thoughts on what you want to do, what type of position, because if I had not been flexible initially, I probably wouldn't be sitting in the role that I'm sitting in today, which I feel suits me very well. So I would just say that being flexible is one of the key things, and maybe thinking outside of your comfort zone. So I know I've been to a lot of career fairs and talked to a lot of students, and there are definitely those students out there that are like, no, I only want to do A, B, or C, or maybe just A. And then I've had a lot of students have walked by my booth and said, I don't even know what I would do for the railroad. And I say, well, come over and chat with me. So, maybe expanding their search a little bit outside of maybe just the companies that they know super well, into companies maybe they don't know as well, because sometimes you can, find yourself upon, a better opportunity than you ever imagined just by kind of opening up your horizons a little bit.
Yeah. When you talk to students at career fairs, what are some of the observation you've made, over the last several years as you've recruited seniors, and, how do you think they, sort of building on the idea of being flexible, should be thinking about strategies for, the job search, and then also the idea of making those connections, building their networks, right, in a strategic way?
So as far as the strategy, I think one thing is, you should definitely apply to more than one or two positions for sure. There's a lot of competition out there. I used to do presentations and I would tell students, look to your left and look to your right. That's your competition. So your classmates are your competition, students graduating are your competition. So make sure, again, you're making a strategic plan about what types of jobs you want to apply for. I always say, don't apply for jobs that you know that you absolutely don't want, because that's a waste of your time, that's a waste of the company's time, and it's not really the best way to build a network. And then as far as networking is concerned, I would say don't be discouraged if you talk to people and they say, we don't have opportunities right now. There are a lot of companies in flux, a lot of people that are just, wanting to hold on to the employees that they have and making sure that they can support their current, workforce. But I have talked to students sometimes a year or two out, and then a year or two later, I'll recall a conversation and say, you know what, I really want to reach out to that person and let them know that I have the perfect opportunity available. So it's an opportunity cost for sure, sometimes, to build up your network. And I think that we're really driven as people to have an immediate payout. But at the same time, I think we all have to remember that sometimes a perfect opportunity doesn't come right away. Sometimes it comes a little bit later.
Yeah. So, you get a lot of students, of course, who have firmly identified the role that they hope to have, right? So maybe it's working in social media or something like that. And perhaps those positions very simply don't exist right now. And so the thought is, okay, should I take a role that I'm not necessarily, it's not my dream path, or should I continue on as a student, right? Should I've become so good at being a student after 4 years at Longwood that I'm just going to do that some more, and weather the storm for the next couple of years. What would be your advice to, a graduating senior, or maybe even a junior, or a young alum who's feeling underemployed, right? When it comes to that idea of staying in school for additional education versus taking on a role maybe that it's not something they're passionate about.
So I can definitely understand that. I can relate. A couple jobs ago, I took a position because the position that I was really interested in wasn't open yet. So I took a risk and said, well, if it I couldn't be any more unhappy than I currently was at that point in time. And I felt like taking the risk was necessary to move my career along. So sometimes taking that opportunity that you don't love right away can open up other doors. So that is a possibility. So I always kind of tell students, don't rule that out. Ask the company, ask them, what they think and where the progression is for the role, because you may be surprised. As far as education is concerned, I think that's a really personal decision, and education is absolutely valuable. But at the same time, you are delaying. If you're a graduating senior and you go right into, say, a graduate program, you are delaying for a while, and most times that first position. And so sometimes I do see graduate students who have gone straight from their bachelor's into a master's program that have this expectation that they should be getting work at higher levels because they have a higher level of education. And for employers, a lot of times that experience for us, at least right now, can be seen as or viewed as more valuable. So, it may pay off in the long run to have that education. But for that first job, I would say that in many instances, you're looking at someone with a 4-year degree or a graduate degree who has the same amount of experience the same way. But one other opportunity that I would, and something that I'm actually looking at myself, is professional certification. So say that, maybe you can have the best of both worlds. So you completed your 4-year degree and you're taking a role that maybe you're a little uncertain of, but you know that you want to advance maybe in that field. So professional certifications are highly sought after now and a great way to enhance your education in a particular area. So that to me is kind of a happy medium between, okay, do I take that first role or do I just, go jump right into that graduate program?
Yeah, there seems like so many options now, right? When it comes to continued education, right? There's no real reason why you would need to, even an online program that's full-time, right? Could be something you might be able to accomplish nights and weekends without necessarily giving up, full-time employment during the day.
Well, and not only that, there's a lot of employers that will also do tuition reimbursement for additional programs. So you could not only be working in that position, but you might also be getting a little bit of money towards your tuition and books and things like that. So it could be also a benefit, to your loans and in your finances as well.
Yeah. When you look at students that are graduating, young alumni as well, what makes an applicant or just an individual really stand out to you? When you look at resumes or LinkedIn profiles or have conversations and someone's like, wow, that student really is someone I'll remember and has differentiated themselves from the rest of them. What usually are the qualities of those candidates?
So I would say, the first thing is you can tell when a student feels prepared for their interview, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. I always tell students, please go to the Career Center, utilize those opportunities to practice, because there are a lot of people who get into interviews and a little bit of nerves. We look past that. We understand that candidates are generally nervous, especially if it's a, position they're really, really excited about. But you can definitely tell when people, I think they formulate thoughts better, they portray themselves better, they are able to highlight their accomplishments better when they're a little bit more practiced. And then as far as a resume is concerned, I think that really depends on the job. For me right now, the big thing is looking for leadership experience. I hire for a managerial training program. And so seeing that someone's had that experience in some way, shape, or form is, definitely valuable to me. But I will also say, don't discount the experience that you have. So for example, I've had students talk about how they worked at a gas station back home and talked about all of the different things that they were responsible for and how fast paced it was. And that was impressive. So maybe to some, it's knowing how to accentuate what you have instead of, focusing on, well, I don't have any leadership experience. You can be a leader without a title.
Yeah. When you look at, when you advise students to say about references or recommendations, things of that nature, how do you view references, recommendations from peers, perhaps? Other students that have observed this person in a leadership role, say in a Greek organization or part of the student government, or would you really advise students to have, adult professionals writing recommendations and things like that?
So I think, at least in my role, this is a little bit of an uncharted territory, right? Because we want to make sure that we're not taking information secondhand, not making assumptions based upon what someone else is saying about that candidate. But what I think is beneficial is on LinkedIn, whether it's your peer, whether it's, an instructor, whether it's someone from the Career Center, if they're endorsing you and you're getting endorsements, that's something that is definitely recognizable. A good cover letter I will say that stands out and kind of is attention grabbing. It really helps as well to kind of sell your skills a little bit. So I would say that I focus personally more on what the candidate tells me and what they present me with than, what their references are saying. I think it's good, and I note it as a positive attribute if they provide them. But I will say there are a lot of companies right now that really don't want to check references because they're worried about making, maybe unconscious bias, maybe negative decisions towards a candidate before they even reach out to them. So I think it's a good thing. I definitely think it's a good thing. I also don't know that I would stress out about not having, 5 to 7 references right out of the gate. Sometimes that happens a little bit later in your career. And, for most times I've actually personally had good relationships with former managers, and they've been, willing to give a reference. But you also have to remember, as you move on in your career, some companies actually prohibit managers from giving references just due to legal reasons and wanting to protect themselves. So it's definitely a positive thing, but it's not something that I really focus on for candidates all the time.
Yeah. Sort of of course, the old adage, right, is it's all about who you know, right, in the world of hiring. And I tend to think that's slightly misconstrued, right? It's all about who knows you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and who is willing to, sort of go to bat for your candidacy. But you're sort of alluding to the fact that in sort of a perfect recruitment process, right, that there's less reliance on referrals, recommendations, and it's more reliant on experiences, skills, and that sort of a thing.
Absolutely. And, I think it's just one of those things where I think we get really good at honing in on candidates and seeing how excited they are about the position. And also, for me, I talk to a lot of individuals who I may have talked to in previous years, but some of the best candidates I think that I've had come on board, they haven't been a referral. They haven't known anyone at Union Pacific. They haven't really known a lot about Union Pacific. And I'm very comfortable and okay with that because, railroading is not something that a lot of students think about. I certainly did not think about it until I moved to Omaha, and where Union Pacific is headquartered here. So, I think it depends on the company and their culture and what they're looking for. But for me personally, I'm more interested in that candidate and how they demonstrate their skills and ability themselves.
Yeah. So I often, have students that are really frustrated because they've made a spreadsheet and they've applied for 100 jobs and they're not getting the interview traction. They're not getting the opportunities. And, do you think that a better strategy is a more focused one? So imagining, okay, I want to live in Omaha and I want to have a role in marketing and communications. And here are 5 companies that I really think I'd like to work for, and begin to develop an outreach strategy, asking for informational interviews with those, with folks who work in those companies. What do you think about that kind of, you don't get the job by applying for it adage, right?
Yes, I definitely understand. There is a lot of frustration, I would say, on our professional or corporate side of things and on our agreement side of the house where, when someone talks to a recruiter and they say, well, you need to apply online. And then they just think, okay, well, that there goes my shot at this position because everybody's applying online. Unfortunately, from a compliance standpoint, to make sure that we're being completely fair across the board, we do have to have everyone come in the same way. But I do definitely think that if there is something that you're really wanting, I think sometimes as a new graduate, you have to decide what's more important. For some people, it's location. They know that they want to be in their hometown or in a certain state or a certain area, or it's more important to find the role that they feel is going to be the best fit for them. So they know that being in that marketing and communications role is going to be, most important. So sometimes I think if you're not necessarily getting to the opportunity that you're hoping for, I think, a strategy is good, but sitting down and really thinking about what is the most important, because if it's the role, then expand your search. There's a lot of companies that are moving to remote work. There are a lot of companies that are, hoping just to find the right candidate, whether they're local or whether they're out of state. So I think as a new graduate, sometimes you have to pick and choose as to, what is the most important. Is it the location or is it the job? And I find for a lot of students, it's the location and then the job. So I would say, sometimes you have to compromise a little bit.
Yeah. Let's talk about your job a little bit, because I think, similar to my job, right? Nobody imagines themselves leading an alumni relations team, right? When they're in college. And I imagine that very few students sort of understand that there's a career in the world of talent, right? In the world of recruitment. Let's talk a little bit about your career path and perhaps like sort of the nuances associated with the recruitment pathway, the talent pathway, and what are some of been your observations about that as a career path and the challenges and opportunities?
So I would say that I've spent a lot of time doing specifically university recruitment, and I started out very heavily traveling to 1 or 2 universities a week throughout the nation. And then as I moved into more corporate roles, it got more to traveling to specific parts of the country and specific schools. And I had a lot of people say, wow, that's so fun. You get to go to universities, you get to talk to students all day. And it is absolutely fun. But sometimes, depending on the role and depending on what I'm looking for, I have to talk to 100 students before I find, and that might be a slight exaggeration, but I might have to talk to many students before I find the one that is as interested in the role as I am interested in them for the role. And, I think it's a lot of, our time frame is very short to get candidates. So you think fall career fairs, every company out there has a 6 to 8 week window to get talent. So it's kind of a constant grind where I find that in talent, whether you're filling a role that is entry level or you're filling a role that, for instance, is integral to the company, maybe to their production or something of that nature, it's a grind. And so you just continually, it's kind of go, go, go. And then you kind of have that break in the breather, and then it's go, 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 go. So if you're that person who really likes to have a dynamic environment, who, wants to be on the go, wants to be, constantly talking to people and likes to be presented with a challenge, then I think talent acquisition is a good path. I have also realized in talent acquisition that you have to be really flexible. In my role, particularly this past 3 years, I've done a lot of different things that walking in the door, I wasn't sure that I was going to do, but it's actually made me a stronger recruiter. It's made me a stronger professional. And so that adaptability is something that, I thought being a recruiter and working in talent acquisition, it was going to be the same thing day in and day out. I was going to go in, I was going to open a job, I was going to have people apply, I was going to interview. And there's so much more that goes into that process than I think people outside of that process really, think about.
And I noticed you mentioned that you started your career in a sales role. And I often imagine that, sales is very much a part of talent and recruitment, right? You do have to make the case. And oftentimes, if you're trying to source for roles that are not as desirable, right, then you're really trying to make the case. What's been your observations about sort of, and I know lots of roles, right, that are elements of sales to it, whether it's selling an idea or selling an opportunity. But what sort of were your observations about sales as it connects to the talent and recruitment field?
So I would say, being good at sales and being able to deliver a pitch about a job is valuable. But there's also a fine line between sales and recruiting, because at the end of the day, if I oversell a position and that person doesn't stay with the company, I'm not doing anybody any good. I'm costing the company money and time. I'm costing that candidate time and, an opportunity maybe that they'd be better suited somewhere else. So yes, there's definitely a sales opportunity there, but it's selling the highlights of the position while being honest about what the job really is. So for example, in my management training program, one of the highlights is upon graduation you are a manager. So there is no 2 to 3 year wait down the line you'll be a manager. No, you are a manager upon completion, but we are a 24/7 operation, nights, days, weekends, holidays, all of those types of things. So I have to be very honest with candidates about, this is not your 8 to 5. This is not just sitting behind a desk and managing people this way. This is being out in the elements. The railroad is outside. So I have to, it's that fine line. But for the people who are really motivated and driven, and the most important thing is for them to have that managerial role, they're very focused on, okay, I know that this is going to be difficult because of the nature of the work, but I know that that is my passion. I want to work with people. I want to manage people. I want to have responsibility in a large company. So I would definitely say there is that fine line, because I don't think my company would be very happy with me for selling this program and then, having no one stay past, 6 months or a year.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the idea of tenures. I think one of the things I've noticed since I graduated from college in 2003 was that this concept of job hopping, of the gig economy, of shorter tenures, is one that has gone both from being heavily frowned upon to sort of more accepted as a pathway for growth, right? I read an article not too long ago that says you leave as much as 50% of your lifetime earning potential on the table if you stay with the same organization longer than 3 or 4 years, because of how much more money you can make if you go to a different company. How do you view tenures? And I've obviously, you don't want anyone to leave Union Pacific, right? Because of course that costs the company money. But how do you view candidates that may have left a role, or maybe desire to leave a role, or have done that a couple of times?
So I think it really just depends on what their story is. So every time that I've ever left a job, it's for an advancement opportunity and it's to advance forward. So you look at a candidate and are they progressing in their career every time they make that hop, or is it, I didn't like my manager, the job isn't what I thought it was going to be, what is their story behind it? Because I think how you tell your story and what your story really is, because I will say that, I've talked to a lot of students, and there's, a lot of fear about, oh, should I take my first job here? And, oh, would it be better there? Or even, professionally and personally thinking about, is that really the right move to make a jump? Because the grass sometimes seems greener on the other side, but I will say that there's always going to be things you really like about your job. And regardless of where you are, there are going to be things that aren't your favorite. And so it really is kind of looking at that and saying, okay, is this person just, are they kind of, is it really kind of boiling down to thinking, are they the issue, or has it been, I want to really progress, and that's how I've been able to do so, is by leaving jobs. And Union Pacific is very unique, where I've been there 3 years. I was hired on as an experienced professional, and having a 3-year tenure at Union Pacific, aside from someone who's a newer graduate, is really not something that you see a lot. Most of my colleagues have been there 10, 15, 20 years, but as an organization, they have moved around the company. So they haven't stayed in their role for 10 years. So I think one of the things, you're talking about the job hopping and, taking different opportunities, talk to a company and see what type of opportunities they have. And I think that a company that even offers you lateral moves to give you career development is really impactful for your career to become more well-rounded. So, maybe look at a company and see what type of opportunities that they have within the company, and say, what is the career progression, and are there any lateral opportunities to develop my career? Because companies like Union Pacific have opportunities to move even laterally, where I've talked to other professionals and people, that have been in the same field as I have, and they've said, we really wouldn't consider someone from this department for that department. And so finding that happy medium where maybe you can job hop within the same company could be beneficial.
Yeah. Well, great. Seems like a great segue to talk about your company a bit more specifically. Are you hiring, and what types of roles are you hiring for? Because as you sort of alluded to, when a student might think Union Pacific Railroads, well, what am I going to be driving a train? Like what is it that, I will be doing? But of course, all companies have business units, right? All companies have accounting, all companies have marketing, all companies have human resources and talent, right? Research and development. And then there's a specialized area where it's the core product itself, right? Which is transportation of goods in your case. And at a university, of course, it's education. At an advertising agency, it's the creative, right? But so what, how do you talk to kids about Union Pacific? Not kids, of course,
Sure.
college graduates.
Yes.
And
Adults, yes.
very much adults going through going through very much adult situations in their lives. I just keep getting older, so
I know. I go back to campus, and every year I feel a little bit older, and I feel like they're all staying the same age. So.
Which is weird because they kind of are, right?
Right, exactly. Because they're leaving and kind of refreshing, and I'm not getting that refresh myself. So yes, very much understanding that these are adults, and I will tell you, sometimes I look at resumes and I'm very impressed at the internships and the leadership opportunities that they've held in such a short amount of time. So I think that the talent out there has even gotten better because of, I think in my year at Longwood was one of the first years that an internship was required to graduate. So internships weren't even necessarily required, where now business programs, engineering programs are all making those required. But back to your question about Union Pacific. So, it really depends on what the student is focused on. So just like you said, we're a large business. We have those typical roles in accounting and marketing and sales and human resources, but we also have supply chain. So, we're a big logistics company. So we have a supply chain group. We have an operating group who focuses on, making the railroad move. And so, yes, I think a lot of people do come up and say, am I going to be driving a train? And I will say, well, to be an engineer, there's certainly opportunities out there, and we could discuss that should you be interested. But I really talk to them holistically about a company and, the strengths that we have, being in business for so long, and the opportunity to move laterally. That was one of the reasons that I decided to leave my former company to come to Union Pacific was, I think progression in your career and moving upwards is great, but I also wanted the opportunity to potentially move laterally and to explore different opportunities to see, well, should I continue on that upward path in talent acquisition, or am I better suited elsewhere? So I talk about that because like I said, a lot of my colleagues who've been at Union Pacific 10, 15 years, they have not stayed in the same role. So they've been able to stay within the same company and the same organization. And another thing that I started talking more about with students is, there's compensation. So, there's your bottom line and your salary, and that's important, but the benefits that are provided to you from a company, I have been finding and hearing from other universities that that's something that's really important to students right now, because they saw their parents struggle in 2008 and they saw, the instability. And so they are looking for sometimes that company with the stability. And what most people don't realize is that by working for a railroad, any railroad employee anywhere in the US does not pay into Social Security. We actually pay into the Railroad Retirement Board. And so to give a perspective on that, Social Security in the red, railroad retirement in the green. So upon retirement, if you do vest in railroad retirement, so for example, say my payout is $1,000 a month, my spouse will actually get an additional $500 a month. So for me, that's a big deal to think about my future. And so, okay, great, I can grow within Union Pacific, and then I can also build up a retirement portfolio that I feel is very strong that I would not be able to get elsewhere. So I kind of talk about those things a little bit because I know students, yes, they're interested in their salary and being competitive, and of course, wanting to potentially, may have student loans they need to worry about. But I also start to talk about some of the things that we have to offer because of the type of company that we are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it makes it all the sense in the world that in periods of instability that people would look as much towards stability as possible. And that's really it. That's the first I'd ever heard of sort of the separate retirement system that you pay into as a result of being in the railroad industry. Madelyn, thank you so much for your time to chat with me today and to share your thoughts with Longwood students. And sort of a last question that I have for you is, we're just a couple weeks away from commencement. It's not a commencement like all the other classes have experienced before. Seniors have completed their coursework, and of course, we'll have an in-person commencement at a later date. But if you could sort of advise seniors who are finishing up school, what are just a few strategies that if you were in their shoes, that you'd be really focused on right now?
So I think, thinking back and trying to put myself back in those shoes and every time I go to a campus, sometimes I really remember how great it was to be in those shoes, is remember that this is an important time in your life, and that, I think there's so many students who really, really stress about the perfect job, kind of like it's a marriage and it's forever. And as much you want to make that, you want to go into making that decision, with a lot of, thought. But if it doesn't work out with that ideal company or that ideal job, just remember there are other doors that will open, there are other opportunities, and there are other ways to grow your career. So I have had, those defeated students come over and say, well, I wasn't hired at so-and-so. And thinking, well, you know what, that's going to happen. It's happened to me before. And if it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't be sitting in the seat that I am in today, more than likely. So I think I would just really be focusing on, trying to come up with that strategy like you talked about, and think about what's more important. Is it the location or is it the job? Focus your strategy around that. Practice makes perfect. So I've been doing a lot of virtual interviews, and we've been doing them for a few years now at Union Pacific. But if you're not comfortable, get comfortable, because this is, I kind of feel the new normal. And, really, and this is really kind of silly, but take it one day at a time. So I have talked to students before, and they're all, kind of riled up about, I didn't find the job and I'm not getting the interviews and all of that. It's okay to take a breather sometimes and kind of regroup. So I think in this uncertain time, you have to just kind of be comfortable with being flexible, and companies not knowing exactly their direction yet. I know a lot of universities don't know their direction yet. So, I think really just take advantage of this time to explore opportunities, and, just do the best that you can as far as picking that opportunity that you think would be the best fit for yourself.
Awesome. Well, that's a wonderful closing thought. Thank you so much for sharing your views, Madelyn. It was lovely to meet you. Handshake. We can do it sort of virtually, right? Or the elbow bump here.
Yes.
But thank you so much. And we'll be sharing your video out to our community on LinkedIn and across our social media platforms. And so we really appreciate your time and energy today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to help at any point in time. Wish the class of 2020 all the best as they, go out into, starting all of their future endeavors. And it was really great to meet with you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.